right, as this Zero Hedge article says, Bernie plagiarizes Stalin with Economic Bill of Rights. And as the article goes into, 2020 presidential hopeful Bernie Sanders, who thinks America would be delighted to pay more in taxes, touted his Economic Bill of Rights during a Wednesday speech about democratic socialism. Remember, this is the same guy who said, white people don't know what it's like to be poor. Maybe not you, Bernie, but that's kind of a blanket statement, and it's totally crazy. But anyway, let's get into this more. Suggesting that he's destined to carry out FDR's proposed Economic Bill of Rights, which the former president was unable to enact due to an untimely death, Sanders pitched to the crowd on a 21st century Economic Bill of Rights, as Red State's Elizabeth Vaughn reports. Yet, as political expert and radio host Mark Levin pointed out on Fox News' Hannity, Sanders has essentially plagiarized Joseph Stalin's 1936 Soviet Constitution and stolen his agenda. Here's an excerpt from Sanders' speech via Red State. And as it says, a Bill of Rights that establishes once and for all that every American, regardless of his or her income, is entitled to, this is the first bullet point, the right to a decent job that pays a living wage, the right to quality health care, the right to a complete education, the right to affordable housing, the right to a clean environment, the right to a secure retirement. These 6 rights, which define Sanders' platform, are indistinguishable from the rights identified in the 1936 Soviet Constitution, which is also known as the Stalin Constitution. Please read Articles 118 to 122 of this Constitution. And then it says, Article 118. Citizens of the USSR have the right to work, that is, are guaranteed the right to employment and payment for their work in accordance with its quantity and quality. Article 119. Citizens of the USSR have the right to rest and leisure. The right to rest and leisure is ensured by the reduction of the working day to 7 hours for the overwhelming majority of the workers, the institution of annual vacations with full pay for workers and employees, and the provision of a wide network of sanatoria, rest homes, and clubs for the accommodation of the working people. Article 120, citizens of the USSR have the right to maintenance in old age and also in case of sickness or loss of capacity to work. This right is ensured by the extensive development of social insurance of workers and employees at state expense, free medical service for the working people, and the provision of a wide network of health resorts for the use of the working people. Article 121, it says, citizens of the USSR have the right to education. This right is ensured by universal compulsory elementary education, by education including higher education being free of charge, by the system of state stipends for the overwhelming majority of students in the universities and colleges, by instruction in schools being conducted in the native language, and the organization in the factories, state farms, machine and tractor stations, and collective farms of free vocational, technical, and agronomic training for the working people. Article 122, women in the USSR are accorded equal rights with men in all spheres of economic, state, cultural, social, and political life. The possibility of exercising these rights is ensured to women by granting them an equal right with men to work, payment for work, rest and leisure, social insurance and education, and by state protection of the interests of mother and child, pre-maternity and maternity leave with full pay, and the provision of a wide network of maternity homes, nurseries, and kindergartens. And as Vaughn notes, it says, about the only thing Bernie didn't pluck from Stalin was the right to a clean environment, something humanity was far less concerned with in 1936. And as they call, green is the new communism in a lot of cases. But I want to go into this a bit deeper because, first of all, I recently confronted Bernie Sanders over his past support for the Soviet Union. He said that they were efficient, that the trains ran on time, the school system was phenomenal, all that kind of stuff when he went there. And he also honeymooned there, I believe. But I called him out on it at a speech recently. YouTube didn't let people see it. Shadow banned it completely. Had like 7,800 views. But anyway, I yelled at him about the tens of millions of people who died in in the USSR. But I want to also mention, look, all these things sound nice. They sound nice, but are they as nice as they sound? The government always shakes shiny keys in front of people, hoping that people will say, yes, give us some of that. We want that. Because it's much more comfortable leaning back thinking that your mommy and daddy are going to give you things, give you free things. But at what expense? It all sounds nice until you actually get into the economics of it and the use of force used against people to achieve these goals. And again, if you consider the fact that children spend most of their life in school and not much of their time with their parents, and including in that time with their parents, they're sleeping for about 7 hours on average, that tells you that they spend most of the time with school as their parent. They grow up believing in them as parents, and it makes them more dependent. And if they're more dependent, they're more weak, and they're more subservient to whatever the government does, and the government doesn't do anything that they don't personally benefit from. And we must remember that. So of course, they're going to try and tantalize us with free things. Let's look at this Bill of Rights that Bernie Sanders puts forward. The right to a decent job that pays a living wage. So you give everyone you give everyone jobs, and most of that is faked through the labor force participation rate in the United States and Canada, hiding the number of truly unemployed people, but also it's vastly manipulated by the government employing people. So government owning a ton of the GDP, it's absolutely unsustainable and causes huge problems, but also where are these people working for? Are they going to create vast amounts of fake jobs like they have in so many of these countries around the world that are completely centralized? Fake jobs just to offload employment, all while hiding other unemployment in the labor force participation rate. The right to quality healthcare, it says. The right to quality healthcare is a tricky one that people are very divisive on, but let's look at the economics of it. I'm from Canada. Look, we have so-called free healthcare, but you also wait for about 12 hours in a waiting room waiting to get the care that you think you're going to get from the few nurses that are paid, because most of the money goes to treatment. But in what form is the treatment funded? Well, taxpayer money is stolen in vast amounts, and that's almost equivalent when you add all of it up to what you'd be paying anyway for that off chance that you might get sick and need that care. But then it gets transferred to these vast pharmaceutical giants, which monopolizes those pharmaceutical giants, which means there's no incentive to compete on the market for cheaper treatment, cheaper medicine, all this kind of stuff. So it brings the price up. It's what creates the problem of high medical prices in the first place, and it affects other countries like the United States and all these other countries in the world that don't have completely 100% government-run healthcare systems and insurance. So when that monopoly is created, it basically allows there to be no incentive to create better drugs or create better treatments that actually cure things, but instead these treatments are meant to not prolong the illness, but essentially put off curing the illness and just getting rid of the symptoms. It creates vast amounts of problems with people who have really terrible, like cancer treatment, for example. A lot of that isn't even covered. Ambulance fees are often not really covered. And then you end up with an unfair market where, we have all these people on the left, big pharma is terrible, all that kind of stuff, and the prices are too high. So what we need to do is then go in and manipulate that system, steal people's money and put it into that system, which goes towards those pharmaceutical giants, which then props up those pharmaceutical giants, which creates monopolies, which brings the price higher. Oh, but the prices are high and there's monopolies, so now we need to steal more money. It's a perpetual circle, and it's meant to fool people, because what's worse than the thought of you don't care about old people, you don't care about sick people, you don't care about babies that are sick, all that kind of stuff? It goes towards the emotional factor rather than the logical factor, which allows people to basically be irrational and accept their servitude. It's a Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution forever, and it's a really dangerous problem, because I got really sick in the United States, and it costs a lot of money thanks to other rackets around the world propping up these major companies where there's no ability for small people to come in and compete because of the size of these big companies. What was that name? Martin Shkreli or something tested those waters by bringing up the price of his patent. That's another thing, patented medication. Government patented, so ideas are patented and you can't come up with a better idea that helps people. Anyway, just to be able to get your medicine approved by the FDA, it costs like something like, I forget if it was like between 100 million and $1 billion. I talked to some guy who was trying to get his vitamin B17, amygdalin, and Laetrile drugs approved by the FDA. And it's just so crazy. They make sure that you cannot do that because they want to keep their monopolies running and they want to keep those high prices high. So you have to have a deep pocket to begin with. But also, when I got sick in the United States, it cost more, but I was treated immediately when I got in. I've gotten sick so many times in Canada where I'm in the waiting room for 12 hours. I've seen people die in the waiting rooms. People get sick and die in the waiting rooms. People always say when I'm in the United States, wow, you're from Canada? They have a great healthcare system. I'm like, you sure about that? Most of the doctors I know in Canada don't even think that it's a good system. And I know people who are also terminally ill that have dealt with hell for years in Canada. Many go to the States for treatment, even though it costs more. It's a racket, and it's meant to pull at your heartstrings because it's like, well, we need to help people that are sick and, you know, poor and all that kind of stuff. It's all a scam. It's a huge trap. Now, going back to this economic Bill of Rights or whatever, and that's a weird thing. Bill of Rights are subjective to whatever you as an individual defend, but as this bullet point says, the right to a complete education. Yeah, that's pretty convenient when you consider the right to an education, again, the government education, the right to be completely propagated and indoctrinated in these indoctrination camps you call public schools, where the government teaches children slowly and more and normalized all the time to be dependent, weak, and stupid and depend on the system, mommy and daddy government, which also, again, by being in the school system, you start to think of the school system as your mom and dad because you see them more than your own parents. That is not a right. That is an enforcement. In a lot of cases, people's children have been taken away for being homeschooled. It's horrible. The government come in and steal your children. Nope. It's the village's children. They're the village's children. They're not your child anymore. It's really, really scary, the realm of slavery we get into there, but we make it shiny and nice and magical because some people wrote some ink on paper somewhere, so of course it's legitimate. And we have to think of it as free this or the right to this. It's, again, a trap for the government to own you more and control you more. This is the kind of stuff that led to all those millions of people dying in the USSR. Anyway, the right to affordable housing, something that's propped up markets throughout the world and created vast bubbles and caused so much homelessness and caused so much poverty because the more the government steals from people, the more the government regulates, the more the government gives, quote unquote, the more they take away. And the more they take away, the more they destroy competition, which means they destroy innovation, they destroy value, they destroy an ability to compete currency, they destroy the ability to work hard for a living and not have it all stolen from the government, and of course they create vast inflation, a hidden tax, and the reason people have low wages, the reason people are unable to buy things or unable to afford housing is because of the government and the central banks in the first place. I mean, it's really sickening to constantly see people that are being used because they're vulnerable to perpetuate this system and make it worse on them. It's been going on since ancient Greece. When has it ever worked? But anyway, going on here. The right to a clean environment. Let us remember, government is the biggest polluter on the planet. Biggest polluter. There's no entity in the world that is more of a polluter. And going back, let's see, they monopolized Standard Oil, they propped up the big petroleum and oil giants, and then they banned hemp, they banned alternatives, they banned water engines, they banned people from coming up with their new inventions and then use a patent system as a weapon. And then they come in and say, oh, well, now the environment isn't doing too well, there's plastic in the ocean, so now we have to ban plastic and come in as the savior, while still continuing to pollute more than any other entity in the world. And now we're going to stop you from being able to make up your own mind, do your own thing, make all these crazy regulations that make it impossible to run a business. You go broke, ban plastic straws, and then start cutting down thousands, millions, billions of trees in order to make paper straws while still continuing to make plastic cups. So ridiculous. You can make plastic out of hemp and cornstalk cellulose, biodegradable, more sustainable, easier to harvest, easier to create. but the government got in the way, and now they say you need to be taxed like carbon taxes in Canada and Norway and elsewhere. It's a complete sham once again. Now let's move on. The right to a secure retirement. This is interesting considering these guys are behind some of the biggest pension schemes in history. And you look at, for example, the pension shortfall, and let's look at it from the perspective of, okay, people born in 2007 are looking to live to an average of 103 years of age. That's more than half a lifetime on a pension. Comes from the taxpayers, completely unsustainable. But then the shortfall for pensions worldwide by the year 2050 is set to be at about $400 trillion, which is more than 4 times the GDP of the entire world. So how do you pay for that, folks? I mean, what are we going to be paying 99% of our income to keep retired people on a paycheck? This is the dependency of focusing or depending on the government and the banking system to ensure your own retirement. They say, don't save for yourself. Don't be responsible with your money. We'll take care of it for you. Because surely we don't have any ulterior motives. It's a complete scam. And again, another example of how we live in a society based on dependence, weakness, servitude under the guise of free stuff, because it's more comfortable to be apathetic and depend on mommy and daddy instead of actually understand these things, understand the economics of it, and why this has perpetuated for so long, and if it works, why it hasn't ever worked yet. Oh, but Norway and Sweden, the most taxed place in the world where it's impossible to afford a house and people are living on the streets, cashless society, everyone's tracked everywhere. They have carbon taxes, it's insanely expensive to fuel your vehicle. Those places, like I just debated a Bernie supporter recently at the Bernie event where I confronted Bernie Sanders, and this person was like, and she was very nice, but she's like, I depend on capitalism to live. I can't help it, because she was selling Bernie Sanders t-shirts in front of the place. But she's like, I want to abolish capitalism. And I'm like, okay, you want to abolish capitalism, but then where are you going to get your money from? You said you use capitalism to sustain yourself. And she's like, oh, well, Bernie will give us stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, where will he be taking it from? Well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, capitalism. So a bunch of capitalists he steals from to give to you. And then you abolish capitalism and you think you're going to get free stuff? No. It'll be like the USSR where they'll destroy the personal life. There's no such thing as family anymore. Everyone's your family, quote unquote, under the guise of the greater good of the greater number, collectivist mantra. You end up sharing houses with people. You end up starving. You fight over loaves of bread. You get put in firing lines if you dare to speak out against it. You're living along train tracks, waiting to take a train to the next place to drain resources from. You have no choice. If the government tells you have to work this job, you're screwed. Basically, and this is the difference, communism and fascism are very close together. Fascism is government ownership, or the government ownership of corporations, government control of corporations. And communism is the government is the corporation, and you work for them. Slave on the farm. You think slavery is bad, then why is it okay suddenly when it's a government that's doing it? These private plantations, that's bad, but when government does it and enforces it at a much greater scale and kills people if they resist, but that's for the greater good of the greater number, so we get free things. Is that what you're willing to sacrifice, folks? Really? So I'm talking to this woman, and she's saying that, capitalism has saved her, but we want to abolish capitalism. And Bernie will give us free stuff, and it's for peace and love. And it's another example of you have become dependent. I'm like, is taxation theft? Yes. Is it hard to start a business with all these regulations? Yes. Well, Bernie wants more of them. Well, yeah, I know, but Bernie wants peace and stuff. Seriously? This economic bill of rights was going around the crowd at this event, and it was absolutely laughable, but also really scary at the same time, considering the implications, the millions of people who died in the USSR, tens of millions of people. And what about Maoist China? Over 50 million people? And every time I mention this to a communist, they're like, well, it's all laughable. You keep saying millions of people, and then they mimic me. 50 million people died. I'm like, is that supposed to be an argument? And they're like, well, that wasn't real communism, or that wasn't real socialism. And I'm like, well, you thought it was at the time when it was, quote unquote, real communism, and now it's not. The saying I often put out there is that I'll take the bait. They say, well, that's not real. We say, my side says, That's not real capitalism. What we see today, it's corporatism. It's government control over corporations. And when government gets involved, it's no longer capitalism. And then the other side says, the centralization side, the statist side says, well, that wasn't real socialism, or that wasn't real communism. Okay, well, let's take that and run with it for a second. If that's not real capitalism, if what we have today isn't real capitalism, it still saved millions of people, brought millions of people out of poverty, and made people's lives sustainable. Even when damaged and restricted and, enforced with socialist policies. Even in that case, it's brought millions of people out of poverty. Even with these government propped up monopolies. So if that's not real capitalism, I would love to see real capitalism. But if what we see in all these countries wasn't real socialism, it was watered down socialism, it was watered down communism, then millions of people have died, millions, billions of people impoverished. God forbid, for the love of God, God forbid we ever see real communism and socialism. I mean, that argument, we can use that, fine. You say that's not real communism and socialism, God forbid we ever do see real communism and socialism then. Because I can't imagine how terrible it is with it not being real. Imagine how bad it would be if it was real. Anyway, we need to understand that people like Bernie Sanders comes under the guise of free stuff. We've seen this before. It sounds nice. Oh, we get free stuff. We care for people. Are you caring for people when you steal from them? Are you caring for people when you end up with a British 1960s situation of 1 for you, 19 for me, 95% taxation rate? Are you dealing with a good system when you have everyone completely controlled and in tune with the government as they bring in a cashless society and they completely control you monetarily? You're like slaves in a farm, all working together for the greater good of the greater number, but have absolutely no individual freedom. You're no longer an individual. You're owned by the state and you're a part of a great collective. It's failed every single time. And we need to defend ourselves from these centralized societies because they're incredibly dangerous. And it will be the death of humanity, the death of individualism, death of the personal life, death of love. They say peace and love. Look at Stalinist Russia. Where's the love there? You couldn't have a family. Oh, well, I'm going to get married tomorrow. Oh, too bad. You're being shipped out to be on the front lines tomorrow as we fight against rebels. Oh, you're a doctor? A great example is Dr. Zhivago. Great book, great film. Oh, you're a doctor? Well, I know you just had a baby and you got to take care of your family, but we're going to pull you away, send you out into the freezing cold Arctic, and make you tend to wounds of children 15 years old that have been shot after being forced on the front lines themselves and dragged away from their families. You think the government isn't going to take it that far? They always have. And it benefits the government to completely enslave us and enforce their rules on us. Why would they not do it this time? Government is a cancer and it always grows. Collectivism is a cancer. Collectivism is a cancerous cult of emotional irrationality. But the only thing that gives it any power is our belief in that system. So are you going to perpetuate that belief? Or are you going to resist the Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution, repeat under the guise of good feelings and, help and, kindness and peace? No peace there. Slavery is not a peaceful thing. It's a terrible thing. And we keep marching right into it. We must, in this age of information, ensure that we do not let this get perpetuated. We break free as free individuals, free human beings. You are free. The only thing that takes that away is the government. The government cannot give you freedom. They can only take it away. Start acting free. Disobey. Rule yourself. Decentralize. Free your mind. Protect your family. Protect yourself. Stop falling for the propaganda. Nothing is free. Anyway, until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here at WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we're so heavily demonetized and censored and shadow banned. It's getting really bad, folks. If everyone just gave $1 single a month to, say, Patreon or our Subscribestar, where we do subscriber-only content, we could really get out of this rut that we are currently in as YouTube tries to stifle independent media and prop up the mainstream media. This is really important. This is one of the most important times in independent media history for us to say it's now or never. Let's keep moving forward and let's be that change that we wish to see in the world. Of course, there's also our Bitcoin address below as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And of course, we got events coming up. So make sure to check us out at anarchovegas.com. Anarchovegas.com. Use promo code WAM, that's WAM, for a 10% discount on your tickets. It's on July 19th, 20th, and 21st in, of course, Las Vegas, Nevada. That's anarchovegas.com. Make sure to check us out there and find us on websites like BitTube and Minds, and just try to support independent media, if not myself, any of the other big independent medias out there, to help us continuously bring our message to you free of charge so that we can really change the guard as we move forward into a dramatically polarized, crazy future. Let's try to make it as sustainable as possible. It comes down to you guys. You are the change you wish to see. You guys will help us get through these tough times. So anyway, check out all those links. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.